Welcome to FPL Selection. Today we'll take a quick look through each team's viable assets for the season, but first a quick look at a few tips and lessons learned I'd like to go through before the season starts. So I've been keeping a list of lessons learned sort of over the past 4 seasons, I guess. I tend to use it, just so I don't repeat previous mistakes. So I go through it a few times this season just to help my decision making, and especially ahead of game week 1, I think you can sort of get a bit excited by a few new players and picks that you sort of think could be good, but maybe aren't the best ones for game week 1. So I thought I'd just show you a few of them and just talk through a couple. I mean, they'll probably be quite obvious to a lot of people, but I think it's a nice reminder sometimes because, like I said, you can sort of get a bit carried away when you're drafting that first week, and might just be come back to something a little bit more sensible for the first week anyway. So the first one is to pick good FPL assets that score points and not just good footballers. And this is something I suffered from probably for most of the time I've been playing the game in the last 20 years, is you just get excited by good footballers and you want to have them in your team. Sometimes you want to pick really obscure players that just to show off your football knowledge rather than just getting the players that will score the points. And I think 2 good examples are on the screen for me is Almiron and Lingard. Never really rated either of them as players. I think, they weren't bad, but I just never thought, you're not that good, really. And then they would start to go on a run of scoring a few goals. People would bring them in, get the points. And I would just keep being stubborn and saying, no, they're not good players. It'll stop. And then both of them just went on mad runs a few seasons ago, and I just get left behind. So, pick the players that will get the points. They don't have to be good footballers as such. If they get points, that's all that matters. I think there's going to be a fair bit of that this season with the defensive contributions. So yeah, just be open to everybody basically, and you're looking for points, not plaudits for your football knowledge. And the next one is you're probably going to make mistakes in game week 1. Your team's not going to be perfect. So, sort of expect to be wrong and be flexible, to put it right. So, you might need to wildcard quite early and, fix it if you've not got it right. So, another added point to that would be not to go against the popular picks early on. I think that's especially true with the picks you're not sure about. A good one for me is the 4.5 million goalkeepers. Very rarely do you get one that looks really obvious at the start of the season. It's sort of a bit of a lottery. And then you'll sort of know after maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and then you'll get them in. So usually it's best just to go with a popular one, like this year Kelleher. Seems like some reasonable logic behind picking him, so why try to overanalyze that when there's not really anything to go on at the moment? So play it safe with the popular option, and then you can always change later on. And I think that sort of applies to maybe attack the first few weeks as well, based on the fixtures, because you're probably not, like I said, you're not going to get it right. So at least if you go for some of the more, what you would consider more certain fixtures with the better teams against maybe the newly promoted teams, and then you can always put it right with a wild card in a few weeks. Especially now we got the double chips as well, you're going to get another set. So yeah, it's a potential option. The next one is captaincy. Very important to get your captaincy right. I mean, again, that's really obvious, double points, but I think when you're building your team, you want to make sure you've thought through your captains. Something I forget to do sometimes, and then you come around to it and you're like, yeah, I really do need Salah in my team, or I do need Haaland in my team. Who do I need to get out so that I can have them in for the captaincy? Good example this year is game week 2. I think we're going to want an Arsenal player against Leeds as captain. So for me, it'll probably be Saka. Not in my game week 1 draft at the moment, so I think I'm going to free hit in order to get him for game week 2. Which, I know it's quite an aggressive strategy, but just an example of I'm thinking captains. I didn't like anything really too much in game week 2 other than Arsenal, but I thought their surrounding fixtures weren't that great to start with either. So, and then a good story I had from a couple of years ago, which I think sort of demonstrates this point well, is around captaincy being important. There was I think 2 or 3 seasons ago, towards the end of a season, I had Bruno Fernandes and Bowen. I transferred them out for a -12, and I got in Kevin De Bruyne and Coutinho, who was at Villa at the time. And I think it was just a fixture swing. It was just they had incredible fixtures for the rest of the season. I just felt like I could really attack. But I ended up losing 13 points that week, which, sounds like a disaster. But actually, I did get green arrows and rose in the ranks that week because I had Son as captain, who was the popular captain that week. So even though I took a -12 and Fernandes and Bowen scored really well in that week, more than the players I brought in, I still got the green arrow because I got the captaincy right. So I think it's very important, that you think about your captains and sort of base your drafts around who do you want to captain in which weeks. And, having a plan to get the ones you can when you need them for the future game weeks. And so, as I sort of said before, you don't have to have the perfect team every week. It's impossible to have everyone. So, good players can score against good teams. So, for example, Saka game week 1, Man United away, perfectly capable of scoring. So, I think that story I just told about Fernandes and Bowen to Kevin De Bruyne and Coutinho is a good example of that. You can't have everyone every week. You can't have a perfect team every week. So it's about sort of looking at the bigger picture, trying to say, well, if I can at least get sort of 4 to 5 weeks out of the next 6 right, if I've got good players from good teams, I've got a good chance of scoring in those sort of bad fixtures anyway. I think last year, the likes of Salah, Palmer, Saka, and Mbeumo and Fernandes, if you had them as sort of long parts of the season, you would score well because, sometimes they will go off in those bigger games and when you're not expecting it or you're expecting a tighter match. So when you've got a quality player, you can't ever say that, Salah's the prime example. He can score against anybody and score several goals. So, yeah, it's just not worth moving them all around so much when you can just sort of have a set and forget bunch of 7 to 8 players maybe that, you can see the consistency from good teams. And then the last one is just to put the money into your 11. You don't need to have, all your bench players to be good options. For me personally, I generally just leave the one substitute, being a reasonable, maybe a 4.5 million defender that you can play sometimes if you need to. Even if they just get 2 points, it's not the end of the world. You get the best players into your 11. Sometimes you might have a busy schedule, like at Christmas or something, you might want to make it a little bit more robust, but for me, I would just get the money on the pitch and, especially the second goalkeeper. I think rotating goalkeepers is a bit of a myth. You generally end up just rotating for the good fixtures, you miss the good clean sheets. I would just get one goalkeeper, ideally a 4.5, and just play him every week, because you get the highs and the lows with them, and as long as you're getting someone somewhere in the middle of the pack, gets a reasonable score over the season, you're not going to go too wrong. So yeah, I just wouldn't worry so much about the bench. After showing my first drafts in yesterday's video, I thought today we could just have a look on the FPL website and just go through sort of team by team and just talk through sort of casually all the players that I'd be interested in from each team. I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail, but just thought I'd try and pick out a few players I think could be interesting as the season goes on, some that might be good, for the first few weeks. So first up with Arsenal. Now, obviously Arsenal, the first thing that comes to mind is defence. We've obviously had the best defence for the last couple of years, and the highest number of clean sheets. You'd expect the same again, really. I think they've added Zubimendi this year as another sort of defensive midfielder, sort of keep the balls better as well, and Norgard as a backup option. So I think they've got a big squad there, which obviously in terms of rotation is not ideal, but I think Raya is going to be a nice safe option. He is 5.5 million, and I prefer not to spend that money, but if you want to go in, sort of set and forget and have an Arsenal option, he's not bad at 5.5. Of course, Saliba and Gabriel, both 6 million. They're not so good for the defensive contribution points because being a better team, they're not always, defending their own box, and generally they're going to have a lot of possession against most teams. But, in the tougher games, they might be able to pick up those DEFCON points, but generally it's all about clean sheets for them. And obviously with Gabriel, you've got the goal threat as well. Gabriel didn't play all the season. He's still got 10 clean sheets there in 28 starts. 3 goals, 2 assists. That's pretty decent for 28 starts for a centre-back. So, I think at some point everyone will have an Arsenal defender in their team. I think the fullbacks I'd leave alone for now. Obviously they've got, 4 players there for the 2 positions. It's difficult to know at the start of the season who's going to be first choice. I'm sure they're going to have a few different setups in terms of, who they play against, which opponents. So I think you might be able to save $500,000, but you're probably going to end up, missing a few games there at the start until we sort of see a pattern emerge. Saka, one of my favourite FPL players because he's just so consistent. Obviously got injured at the end of last season, but I think if you want to set your team up now for a longer term draft, he's perfect to leave there for most of the season. Can score against anybody. Got Gyökeres there up front now to finish the chances. So, United away is a tough game at the start. I think United are going to be much better this year, but I think if you just want someone that's set and forget for a long term, Saka's perfect in that mould. I'm not too interested in the other midfield options. I think, the wing spots are going to be up for grabs. Obviously bought in Madueke. I'm not sure he's much of an asset at the beginning, to be honest. Trossard, Martinelli. Yeah, it's just going to be difficult to see, who's going to be playing regularly at the start. Ranieri could be decent at some point. Only $5.5 million. Obviously a very talented player and shown a few glimpses last season of what he can do. So certainly not one from the start, but I'll be keeping an eye on him for later in the season. Mentioned Zubimendi earlier, probably not going to be an option. Probably not too many DEFCON points there. It's only 5.5. And then looking at the strikers, Havertz is 7.5, so quite expensive when you're not guaranteed the minutes at the start. Gyökeres is coming at 9. Could be interesting if he, can hit the ground running. He is a goal scorer, and I think that's something Arsenal have missed. I think Havertz is a good player, but I'm not sure he's an out-and-out goal scorer. So there's enough creativity in that team that, a proper number 9 who's going to be in the box should get some decent returns, but, I have to see how fit he looks. Certainly don't think I'd start with him, but, yeah, might be one to wildcard in early if he, looks really sharp and scores a few goals. So let's now take a look then at Villa. So Martinez is suspended for the first game. So I have noticed that Bezo is going to start the first match against Newcastle. So anyone on a bench boost 1, which is the strategy I'm looking at, could be a nice option if you want to have something different, bit of Villa defence. I know Newcastle are a good side, but with the Isak and Gordon injuries, potentially, might be a little bit light up front. Could be a nice option. Obviously, it's only for that 1 week, and if you're going to wild card early, like I am, otherwise, it's a bit of a waste of $500,000 there. The defence doesn't really jump out at me. Konsa's there at 4.5 again. He's quite reliable last year, but his defensive contribution numbers were quite low, so I don't think you're going to get many extra 2-point games with him. And then the full-back situation, it's difficult to know, who's going to play at left back. They've got 3 options there, really. Cash hasn't really pushed on as the way we thought he might a couple of seasons ago. Doesn't get many attack and returns. What did he get last year? A goal and an assist in 24 starts. Yeah, there's nothing exciting there. And then sort of centre-backs, it's, Ming and Pau Torres are going to sort of rotate quite a lot. Konsa will start most of the games, but yeah, I just don't think there's a good option there, even though Villa had a good defence sort of towards the end of last season. So I think it's going to watch and wait there. Rodgers, potential small injury at the moment after we went off in the last pre-season match, but he was class last season, 8 goals, 11 assists. He is up to 7 million now, but he's definitely on my watch list. He was in one of my sort of initial drafts when the game sort of opened. I put him straight in because I thought I was going to want him, but I think for the minute there's quite a few expensive midfielders that we're already going to have in our teams, so I've left him out for now. But with an early wild card, I might end up bringing him in again because he's really important for the way Villa play, and plenty of returns last year, and I expect a few more this season. And in terms of the other midfielders for Villa, I think Tielemans could be interesting, but 6 million's a little bit expensive for someone like that. Might get some penalties, potentially. He did get injured towards the end of last season, but he was playing really well before that. 3 goals, 7 assists last year. Might be one to look at when, maybe we need a good run of Villa players and we're looking for 2 or 3. He might be one to double up with Watkins and Rodgers or something. But yeah, I'm not sure on him at the moment. Ramsey's off to Newcastle, most likely 5.5 million. So yeah, I don't think he's an option. And Malen, I'm not sure about the minutes, especially now Gesson does come in. He's supposed to be a very good player. So maybe you could get away with the first few weeks if you were going to do an early wild card. He's had quite a few goals in pre-season, but I'm not sure that's one for me. I think with Villa, to be honest, it's Rodgers or Watkins for attackers, but yeah, I can't see anything else there. I mean, Watkins is obviously Mr. Consistent. There's no Duran this season to get in his way, so the full pre-season he scored quite a few goals as well. Looked quite sharp in the pre-season matches, so yeah, it could be a nice one to start there with, probably Newcastle home's the trickiest game they've got in the first 5. So yeah, I think if you can afford the budget of 9 million, I would start with him if I could afford it, but just the way my team's set up at the moment, I can't quite get to him. But yeah, I think he could be a nice one to hold for the first sort of 5-6 weeks till the first wild card. Then let's take a look at Bournemouth. So obviously Bournemouth have lost many of their defenders from last season. See, Kepa's not there in goal now, but they have put Petrovic in, 4.5 million. Don't think he's one to start the season with. Going to Anfield first game. They've got Spurs away, they've got Newcastle. Brighton's always a difficult game. Just don't think there's going to be many clean sheets there. So might be one to look at on the first wild card, but Bournemouth did have a decent defence last year, so if they can get some new signings in and sort of replicate what they did last year, it might be a nice option in the future. And in terms of defenders, not really anything that jumps out. The new signing Truffaut should play left back. By all accounts, he's a very good player and very attacking. So again, not sure you'd want to start with him, but potentially in the future could be one to look at. I'm certainly going to keep him on my watch list. He'd be the Kirkes replacement. Then they've also now brought in a new defender, Diakite, I think it is. And that's, I think, the second most expensive signing. So you'd like to think that, that's someone that's ready to come into the first team. Probably alongside Senesi. Senesi a couple of seasons ago was looking very good, especially in FPL. 4 goals and 5 assists. I think he got injured for that last sort of stretch of 10 games, so it's not bad for 26 starts. And by all accounts, his DEFCON numbers would have been very good in that season too, so he might be one to look out for in a few weeks' time. And then looking at the midfield, Kluivert's out injured at the moment, and he would still be the penalty taker by all accounts, so again, one to monitor later in the season, but 7 million is quite a jump now for him. Dango Otara is possibly going to Brentford, so that should open it up for Semenyo and Tavernier to be starting most weeks at the moment. And potentially Tyler Adams could be a nice option. 5 million if you really need to go for a cheaper player. I think his DEFCON numbers could be pretty good. He's a sort of all-action ball winner in the sort of number 6 role for them. Could be interesting, getting those DEFCON numbers. Might be sort of 4 points a week, could be a nice one if you need a cheaper player or maybe a first bench option. And then Evan Nilsson has come in at 7 million this year. He got 10 goals and 5 assists last year in 28 starts. I think he could be a really nice player to have, certain when Bournemouth have good fixture runs. I think he's a very good player, fits their system perfectly. So, yeah, again, not one from the start for me, but I've definitely got him on my list for the first wildcard potentially. Anyone else on the list there? Krupi Jr., another one that could be interesting. 4.5 million, so obviously the lowest price for a striker. supposedly scored a lot of goals in the second league in France, I believe, or Belgium. I can't remember now off the top of my head. But he's one that you might want as your sort of bottom price striker. And yeah, he's had some minutes in pre-season, so at the worst he might be getting some substitute appearances, as it seems like it's just him and Evan Nilsson as sort of the main number 9s at the moment. So then moving on to Brentford. Obviously Thomas Frank's left now, so you wonder what's going to happen with Brentford, although Keith Andrews has been promoted from within the coaching staff, so say it's going to be quite similar to how they've played the last couple of years. Kelleher's in there at 4.5. Going to have to wait and see the team news if he's going to play. Sort of small injury, missed the last pre-season friendly, but I think Forest away is a nice opening fixture. Forest aren't sort of a free scoring side. I think they've only had 1 goal in 7 pre-season games or something. So yeah, Brentford are always a team to pull up a surprise and set up to be difficult to play against. So, and if you remember last season, Fleckham was quite good for bonus points. Made a lot of saves. The way that Brentford play, they sort of try to encourage the longer shots, and the goalkeeper tends to make quite a lot of saves. So he's in my team at the moment for the start, but I just have to see if he's going to make it to game week 1. Valdemarson apparently is the reserve keeper at 4 million again, so if you wanted to have both of them, you could get that at 9.5 million if needed. Collins is supposed to be very good for the DEFCON points, 5 million. Only had the 2 goals, but 7 assists was pretty good last year for him from playing all 38 games. Might be a nice set and forget option. I'm sure the DEFCON numbers would be good for a Brentford centre-back, so that's one to monitor. Then if you wanted to save 500,000, Vandenberg apparently is now the first choice alongside Collins at centre-back. And he's only 4.5 million, so he didn't play centre-back many times last year, so any sort of data on him for the DEFCON points is probably not going to be accurate or anything close to what he'll get as a centre-back. So yeah, that's one I'm going to be monitoring anyway, because I don't think I want to spend 5 million on a Brentford defender, but if Vandenberg can get anywhere near the Collins numbers, could be an interesting long-term pick later on in the season. And then there's not really anything too interesting there in Brentford defence. I don't think any of the defenders are particularly attacking. I mean, Hickey's back from injury now. He's only 4 million, so he might be the budget bench option going forwards. But again, you'd have to see some minutes there, and Coyote's, by all accounts, playing quite well as their right back at the moment. So yeah, I might just want to monitor that. Sharda's come in at 7 million. I think that's a bit steep, to be honest. I know he did score a few goals last year, but I'm pretty sure he did have a hat-trick and a couple of braces, so it was only a few games where he really performed to a higher level. He was a very quick player, gets in behind, so might be a nice one against sort of the better teams playing on the counter-attack. But I think 7 million is quite expensive for a Brentford attacker. I think it was Mbeumo was 8 million last year, maybe, or close. He's certainly not Mbeumo, so maybe he can take another step up this year, but I certainly won't be going close at that price. I think that was quite a jump for someone like that. And then I've heard that Damsgaard can be quite a popular player. He got quite a few assists last year, but they've also got I'm going back to defence now. Sorry, I missed Lewis Potter earlier. He's now classed as a defender because he played wing back quite a lot last year. But in the pre-season games, he's played a few games on the wing, so might be an out-of-position winger there for Brentford. I know they're trying to sign a few players, so it might not come through, but one to keep an eye on there. And then Thiago, the forward, 6 million. Might be on penalties, because it does look like Visser's going to leave. But again, Brentford are trying to do some business in the transfer window, so again, that might be one just to keep an eye on and wait until we see a little bit more, maybe at the end of the transfer window. So Brighton, I think the defence is probably a wait and see. I think we were expecting bigger things from them last year, but didn't really see good numbers from them. But they've all come in quite cheap, so think Verbruggen might be a nice shout as a 4.5 at the beginning of the season. Some good fixtures, reasonable fixtures, I suppose, would be the better description. There's not many 4.5s to jump out really at the start of the season. I think the interesting one is going to be De Kuyper. Scored quite a few goals at his previous team in Belgium. Can't remember off the top of my head. But he's got quite a good record for scoring goals. So he did get one in pre-season the other day. Might be one to keep an eye on. He's potentially going to be my game week 1 team for a bench boost. Don't really, if I was not going to wildcard early, I probably wouldn't have someone like him, but one to keep an eye on anyway. And then the rest of the defence, I'm not too sure. Van Heck might be alright for defensive contributions, but I think Dunk's going to rotate a fair bit this season. They've brought in Copyrigh, Buscagli. They've still got Igor. They've still got Webster's injured actually, but there's a good selection there, so I think it's a wait and see with the rest of them. Matoma's in at 6.5, 10 goals, 5 assists. He's a lovely player, but I think he's just you just sort of can't read when he's going to score his points, so it's probably a little bit too expensive for someone that's not so consistent. And yeah, unless you keep him the whole season, which I don't think is viable with someone like that, it's difficult to know when he's going to get his points. Kind of the same with Minter really, who is actually in my game week 1 team at the moment. He's only 6. The 6 goals and 5 assists from 20 starts last season, so that's a pretty decent return. I think he's a player that's really going to step on this year. He's definitely got all the attributes to be a top player. He's so quick, very good feet, and I think once his decision making gets better, which is something that can come with a bit of experience, I think we're going to see a real proper player there. So I think he's going to be my sort of riskier punt for the first game week. And Jorginho Rutter, he played up front in a couple of the last friendlies, so might be a nice one as well at 6 million. Had some injury issues last year, but still got 5 goals, 6 assists, 19 starts. I think this is the issue of Brighton, is it's not, it gets shared around a lot, and there's not so much, one talisman. It's more several players that you're going to see, making the contributions. Then Belieber might be a nice option at 5 million, potentially on the DEFCON points there. O'Reilly could be one to watch, 5.5 million. Potentially could be playing number 10 in the first few matches if Welbeck isn't in the starting lineup. And could be on penalties as well if Welbeck doesn't start. Apparently he's the next in line, so one I'm sort of monitoring as a potential instead of Minter, but that would definitely be a bit riskier, I think. And I think other than that, you'd be taking a minute's risk with anyone else. Potentially Welbeck, but he sort of started in what was deemed the second team when they played 2 matches on the weekend on the same day. Would be on penalties if he's on the pitch, and he has got a good record. Last year 10 goals, 5 assists, but yeah, unless we get some sort of confirmation that he's playing, then I think might have to wait and see with Welbeck, I think. Okay, so Burnley next up. Dubravka's come in from Newcastle. He's in at 4 million, so he might be the budget goalkeeper to go to. Has a slight injury at the moment, so I'll have to wait and see if he's going to start game week 1, but I think by the time you get to your wild card, he's potentially going to be the one just to sit on your bench for 4 million. And then in terms of defence, I think the only real option that's available at the moment is Esteve. He's 4 million, and apparently he's a sort of all-action centre-back, gets his head on everything, so probably going to be quite good on the DEFCON numbers. Obviously with Burnley, you don't know how well they're going to do in terms of keeping clean sheets. They obviously had a very good record in the Championship last season, but when you step up to the Premier League, it's quite often doesn't work just to sit back and sit behind the ball. So one to monitor there, but he could be a nice one just to sit on the bench potentially. Then otherwise, I'm not really that interested in much of the Burnley attack. I think potentially Brozier, if he can get back to his form of a few years ago when he went on loan to Southampton. He looked like a real player, but he's had a lot of injury issues. Could be a nice one at 5.5 later in the season, but he's not really fit to start the season, so I think he's the only one that sort of I put in any kind of watch list for now. So let's move on from Burnley to Chelsea. There's a lot of picks at Chelsea. Obviously Sanchez, the goalkeeper, is only 5 million. Chelsea had a pretty good record towards the end of last year, improved a lot. And they've got decent fixtures to start the season. So if you wanted to spend that little bit extra in your goalkeeper, then Sanchez might be a nice shout for the first few weeks. 20% ownership at the moment, so he obviously seems to be quite popular. Cucurella's in at 6. He's very attacking last season and just keeps popping up in the middle of the box, almost like a striker at times. And I think he could have a really good run this year. 6 million is expensive, but that's because, he had 5 goals, 2 assists last year. But if you get him at the right time, I think, might be some few goals and plenty of clean sheets in there. Although the injury to Colwill is going to be, something that they're going to have to deal with. It's probably their best defender, and I'd say, the likes of Chalobah, Tosin, Badiashile and Fofana. I mean, Fofana's lots of injuries, so he's probably not the player he was. Are they going to keep Reece James fit? Obviously he makes their defence a lot better when he plays. So for me, it's going to be wait and watch on their defence. I think losing Colwill was a big blow, but plenty of nice options there. Cucurella, Sanchez, and maybe Reece James if you're feeling risky, but I'd say once Champions League starts, it's going to be very risky on the minutes. Obviously Palmer is a no-brainer, 10.5 million. I think if you can afford him, you have him in most of the season. He's got great fixtures at the start. He'll be in my team game week 1. Don't need to say any more about him really. I think in terms of the other Chelsea attackers, Pedro's probably going to be the number 1 striker to start. He's in at 7.5 million, 10 goals, 6 assists last year. It's only a 23 start, so that's pretty good. Now he's in a better team full of better players. Looked very good playing alongside Palmer, so he's in almost 55% of teams. It's going to be quite painful if he does score in the first couple of weeks and you don't have him, but I'm probably not able to afford him at the moment, so I'll have to see. Just a bit worried about the minutes with Delap. He might end up only playing sort of 60 minutes, so I'll have to see how that goes. Then the midfield options, I don't really see anything else that's worth going for at the start. We'll have to wait and see. I think Esteval could be very interesting. Very, very talented player. You see what he's done as a youngster already, and already looks quite comfortable in the Chelsea team when he's had his cameo appearances in the friendlies. So it could be one that's going to come out of nowhere, and he's only 18 I think, so potentially the next Neymar there in terms of Brazilian star. So let's move on now to Crystal Palace, who I was really big on before, seeing that potentially Guehi and Eze could be leaving before the season starts. I think with Palace, the thing is they're quite a system-based team, so yes, they would miss those 2 players, but I don't think it would be so detrimental that they would fall apart. I think they could find the replacements that might not be quite to the same level, but would fit into the system, and they'd still have some firepower there that's going to keep them having some good results. The only issue with them is probably Europe. They're in the Conference League now, so they have to play the qualifiers between game weeks 1 and 2, and then the second leg between 2 and 3. So there's going to be something to watch there with the minutes. But the only thing I would say about Palace is they've had a lot of friendlies where they've played their first team, so they should be fresh and ready to go from the start. So, which you could see in that Community Shield, they looked very sharp. Henderson's in at 5. I think that's a bit much, to be honest, until we see a little bit more. Munoz for me was the first name on my team sheet. 5.5 million. He's so attacking. He basically plays like a winger for them. 4 goals and 6 assists last year. I think he could have had a lot more. So hopefully he's working on that end product, because he gets into such good positions. And the only thing I'm worried about with him is when they do play the European games, can he keep sustaining this crazy endurance he has to keep going up and down for a full season of league and European games. But he's going straight in for me. I think he's someone that can score points in any match, even if they're likely to concede. He's going to score. He's going to, pick up assists. Yeah, he was straight in for me. And then the other defenders all in at sort of 4.5, 5 million. Lacroix is supposed to be very good for defensive contributions. And, maybe worth paying the extra 500,000 than the other centre-backs. But then potentially you could see, Chris Richards might play a little bit more, might be worth a look. I think midfield, Eze, if he stays, is obviously a great option. 7.5, maybe a little bit expensive, but 8 goals, 8 assists last year, pretty good. And you don't expect him to improve again this season. Sarah's quite popular. For me, he's a nice weapon on the counter against the better sides. So potentially you might see that Chelsea away and Villa away, and 1 and 3 might be his fixtures. But personally, I'd prefer to go Eze or Mateta. Munoz would certainly be in front of him for me. But if you like his sort of statistics, where I think he's one of the best for expected stats, might be one to look at, especially if you not quite got the budget for the others. And as I mentioned, Mateta, he's in my Game Week 1 team. He's just a very streaky player, and once he's fit and, had a nice run of games, he's, just the last couple of seasons he's gone on some real goal-scoring runs, scores against teams you don't expect him to. He's just brilliant on the counter-attack. Should be on penalties now. He was sort of sharing with Eze last year, but looks like he's number 1 choice at the moment, so yeah, he's definitely in for me. 14 goals and 33 starts last year. And as I've said many times, he killed me 2 seasons ago. So I never forget about that. So yeah, I'd rather start with him than feel that pain again. Everton, I think Pickford's probably a little bit expensive at 5.5. It's the centre-backs for Everton, really. Tarkowski would have had an extra 40-something points last year if the defensive contributions were in. So, he's potentially going to average 4 points a week if Everton don't concede more than 1. Add that to some clean sheet, some nice fixtures. He, could be a very high-scoring player this year. I'm not sure I'm going to have him Game Week 1, but that's just because I'm attacking with a bench boost. So, but I think when I come to wildcard, he's likely going to be in if, he keeps up that level of getting those defensive contributions. So I think he's going to be a nice one. The Everton attack's a bit more interesting this year. I mean, I wouldn't ever trust a Moyes side to score many goals, but I certainly added in the firepower there. And Dye is supposedly on penalties, but I don't know if that's going to continue. He's 6.5. Alcaraz is a player I've always liked, 5.5 million. He always seems to, arrive in the box at the right time to score. Didn't get many minutes when he came in January last year, or last season, but he could be one to watch. I've definitely got him on my list for potential Game Week 1 for a little punt. Then also, Dewsbury Hall's coming at 5 million. That could be an absolute bargain if he plays number 10 like he did in the friendly. I'm not sure he will. Potentially he might end up as a number 8, but for 5 million there might be some goals and assists there. I think he was on the corners as well, so definitely one to look out for. And the new striker Barry, I was saying in yesterday's video, I've been having a good look at him. Looks like an interesting player, very big, strong, mobile, makes good runs in behind. He's a bit of a pest as well, and he can certainly finish. So yeah, it could be an interesting one as the season goes on. Can't see Grealish in there yet. He's just joined, so I think he's 6.5 million maybe. Could be one in a few weeks' time that will, if he can get back to his best, then yeah, definitely a potential asset. So moving on to Fulham, I think not much to speak about with Fulham. I think Anderson's quite good for the defensive contributions if you're looking for a cheaper defender. And I think their stats were quite good last year, Fulham. Just weren't, they would concede the goals even though the number of chances they were conceding were quite low. So, a few tweaks in the system, maybe they can improve on that, but no additions yet to the defence, and Robinson's out injured, so he's a no-go at the start. In terms of midfielders, the most interesting one is Josh King. He's 4.5 million. He started most of the pre-season games. Quite a few as the number 10, so By all accounts, he's a very good player, young player coming through. So yeah, he might get some good minutes in the first few games. Interesting to keep an eye on, especially if you're looking for a budget midfielder. And Jimenez is in at 6.5. Now, he was supposedly going to be second choice this year, but it looks like Muniz is on his way to Italy. So Jimenez has only just come back to pre-season training, so I don't think he's going to be 100% fit, but one to monitor later in the season maybe. But I'd imagine they're going to try and bring someone else in, not just have one striker for the whole season. Leeds have a new goalkeeper there. Perry's another 4.5 option. They've got a few 4 million options as well. Bijol is supposedly another sort of all-action centre-back. Get his head on things. Quite good from attacking corners as well. But he will miss the first match. It might be a nice one to keep on your bench for a bench boost later on. Then Goodmanson's the left back now, so say, and Joe Rodon is there at the moment at 4 million, so maybe some nice bench options there. And looking at the midfield, nothing really jumps out for now. I don't think any of those attackers are really going to get you that excited the first few weeks anyway. And supposedly they're close to signing Calvert-Lewin, so I think Pirot would have been on penalties. Maybe will be at the start of the season, but I think if Calvert-Lewin comes in, if he proves his fitness, most likely he's going to end up being the first choice striker, so that'll be one to monitor. But yeah, I'm not sure there's anything that jumps out much from Leeds other than sort of budget options. And Liverpool obviously do have plenty of options. Alisson's in at 5.5. If you want consistent clean sheets and you want to set and forget, might be a possibility, but I think if you look at Van Dijk on the DEFCON points, it's very, very high. He's got a good chance of consistent, clean sheets and the extra 2 points for the defensive contributions. Could be a really nice option there. Kirkez is maybe not the one at 6 million. I think the idea is that both fullbacks should get high at different points in the system, but I think he'd be a wait and watch at the beginning unless you wanted just to go for the clean sheets. But I think Van Dijk would be a better option to start with. And obviously you've got Robertson there who might take minutes off him. Bradley is injured at the moment. Maybe will be ready for game week 1. I did have him in a very initial draft just because of the price at 5 million. I think he might play, sort of share the minutes with Frimpong. Although he did look quite good in the Community Shield, so I think it's sort of game dependent who they'll play in that position, but I think it's a bit risky if you go for, either one of those until we sort of know a pattern. Salah I don't really need to speak about. I think he's in for me, captain game week 1. Better to have him and get rid of him than not have him and be chasing him. I think Gakpo could be interesting, 7.5. He's going to play the left wing unless they sign another attacker. I think Ekitike could play out there and potentially Wirtz at a push, but imagine Gakpo, if he performs, should be able to keep that place. Got 10 goals last year, which is a pretty decent return for 23 starts. In and out of the team a lot, obviously, with Diaz last year, but he should have a lock on that left wing, until he loses it. And then obviously Wirtz, 8.5 seems like a good price if he can, get the returns that we're expecting from him. Quality player. He's now in a team of better players, so yeah, I don't think anyone's not aware of him. So he'll definitely be my game week 1 team anyway. And then Ekitike, who, he's a very promising player. Looked very good in the Community Shield. If Isak does come, then obviously that's going to limit his minutes, but potentially the first 3 weeks or so might be worth a punt alongside one of the others. So yeah, it's certainly interesting to me anyway. Keep an eye on him. City, I think the goalkeepers you stay away from at the beginning. I imagine Ederson will start the season, but a bit of talk of him potentially leaving, and you never know. Potentially if Trafford's brought in, maybe they'll start him. I think it's a bit risky the first week. Vardy was injured the other day. I don't know if he's going to be fit, so we'll have to wait and see on him, but quite expensive, seeing as he'll probably play centre-back this year. Aitnuri could be nice at 6 million. He was very attacking for Wolves, and if he continues the way he sort of started at City in the Club World Cup, they can get their clean sheets going again this year, City, then, he could be gold at 6 million. But almost like a Man City winger for 6 million with the clean sheets. I think I'd avoid the centre-backs for now. There's so many of them. They're gonna rotate like they always do. The attackers, it's kind of mostly the same story. I think Marmoush could push through at some point, but difficult to know if he's going to start. For 8.5, that's a lot of money for someone you're not sure is going to definitely play. And Reinders is 5.5. Must be on the second page here. There he is. Scored a couple of goals in the friendly the other day. Should have had a hat-trick. I've already said about this before. I'm sure everyone's aware of it, but just the way he arrived in the box was quite nice. It was sort of like the way Gundogan used to do it a couple of seasons ago for the cutbacks. Obviously, if they're playing with the out-and-out wingers, Doku and Savinho each side, he might just be there on the penalty spot every time for a nice tap-in. Potentially going to be my Game Week 1 team as a bit of a punt. We'll have to see. And then obviously Haaland, 14 million. If you're not going with Salah, I think you go with Haaland, captain potentially. Everyone knows about Haaland, so we don't need to go into that. I'd definitely have him in my team if, budget allowed, but I'm just going to go for Salah ahead of him at the moment. In United, Onana's potentially out for Game Week 1, so I'd avoid that for now. I think I'd probably avoid the defence altogether, to be honest, other than if you could bench someone like a Dorgu, who's been very attacking in pre-season. I think he should play left wing back for most of the games at the start. But yeah, not the best fixtures to start with United, so I think for United it's probably Fernandes if you're going for a midfielder. 9 million, quite expensive, but it looks like, if he can continue his goal scoring and assists, he's a very creative player, so with the added firepower now with Mbeumo, Cunha and Sesko, I think he's got the players there to finish the chances he creates. So I think for me, if I could have him in Game Week 1 until Game Week 38, I probably would. So I'm going to wait for the first wild card, but I think he's also got the defensive contribution points. He's very good for that. So I think he's just got so many routes to points. If you can get him in your team, I think it's going to be, a nice consistent plod along the 38 games for him. Other than that, I'm not too sure about the rest of the midfield. I think Mbeumo and Cunha were good last year, but at 8 million, neither have penalties now probably. Mbeumo's on corners, so, might be something there, but I think for the price and what you're going to get, they should be great players for United, no doubt, but I'm not sure they're going to be the best fantasy assets this year. Casemiro, if he does sort of stay in the 11, 5.5 million. He only got the 1 goal last year, but he's very threatening from set pieces, and that's something we've been working on, for this season. Should be very good for the defensive contributions as well. I think his stats look quite good when he did play last year. And then obviously Sesko's come in at 7.5. Not one for Game Week 1, I don't think, because I'm not sure he's going to start, but if he can solve all of our problems, then he'll be in my team at some point, I'm sure. But very talented player, got all the attributes there to be a top striker. So we can, give him the right service. I think there's a good chance he might be the answer to the goal scoring issues for United. Then moving on, let's take a look here at Newcastle. I think defence is a bit messy for the first few games. I'll probably avoid, especially at the prices. Potentially Lewis Hall could be good. He was very attacking before he got injured last season. Livramento only 5 million might be worth the saving. I think it's all a little bit up in the air. They've just signed Tior from Milan. And yeah, I think might be a wait and watch on the Newcastle defence. You've got Ramsdale in goal as well as another option. So yeah, wait and see on them. Langa's coming at 7. I think that's way too high for him. Very good player to have in your team. Very quick, good on the counter, but I'm not sure he's got the productivity for 7 million. And then just looking through the rest of the list here, Gordon's coming in at 7.5 as well, I believe. There he is, 7.5. Might not make Game Week 1. He'll be on my watch list for later in the season when they have a bit of a better run. But yeah, he might end up playing up front at the beginning of the season if they don't get anyone in, especially with Isak not, saying he's not going to play. They're looking at Visser. I think Visser would be a nice fit. if he does come in, so that'll be one to monitor, but probably not for game week 1. And Forest, the defence, it definitely tailed off in the second half of last season. It certainly weren't as good as the season went on, but, you know, we could give them the benefit of the doubt. Pre-season, you know, fresh start, you know, make a few tweaks. Nuno's a very defensive coach, so, you know, we've got Sales in at 5 million, but I think the key to them is going to be the centre-backs, Murillo and Milenkovic. Very good defensive contribution numbers. Murillo was also very good on the bonus last year. 5.5 million, yeah, could be a decent price if they can, you know, put together a nice little run of clean sheets. I think it's 5 clean sheets in 7 pre-season games and 1 goal scored in 7. So you can see the way that they've been playing so far. It's very much clean sheet first. Anderson's quite sort of raved about. His defensive contribution numbers very, very good. He's the type of player that, you know, he's a young lad. He can definitely improve going forward as well. So he might be an interesting one at 5.5 million. Sort of as your 5th midfielder. And Doy is supposed to be the Elanga replacement. Very quick, good player. He'll be one to watch for sort of later in the season. And then strikers, they brought in Igor Jesus from Brazil. Now, by all accounts, he's a very good player, very quick. You know, he's going to make the runs in behind. And then Awoni's back to fitness as well. So Chris Wood's got a bit of competition there. I think Chris Wood will start the season, but 7.5 million in a team that doesn't score many goals. I think if I doubt him again, he's probably just going to go on another run. 20 goals last season. But I'm not sure I like it at 7.5. I'm going to have to see how they look, I think. Maybe on the first wild card if I've got it wrong. Next up is Spurs. I think their defence could be a lot better this year. It was obviously terrible last season. Thomas Frank, you know, should set that up much better, you would have thought. Vicario at 5 could be alright if you're looking for a slightly more expensive keeper. But I'd definitely wait and see. I wouldn't sort of go just on clean sheets with Spurs. Pedro Porro, I think, is going to be a really nice pick. 5.5 million. Definitely my game week 1 team. Always very attacking. 2 goals and 6 assists last year. And to be honest, I think it could have been a lot more. He was certainly very creative. But it's the fact that he's got a good chance of defensive contribution points. He should be on a lot of corners and free kicks now that Maddison's out for most of the season. So I think he's going to be a very nice option. And yeah, with improved Spurs defence, maybe a few clean sheets. So yeah, I think for me, he's going to come in at the start. You know, there's a few budget options there. Spurs, Van der Ven, Spence maybe. Mary's in at 5. He should be very good for defensive contribution numbers. But yeah, I think for me, it's Pedro Porro or no one at the moment. And the attackers, well, there's a lot of names there. We don't really know how they're going to set up properly. I think Kudus should get the minutes, but 6.5. Yeah, I want to see a little bit first before I went there. I think Tell's a very talented player, 6.5, but not in the first choice 11s from what we've seen in pre-season. I have to see the Super Cup tonight, maybe. Solanke could be nice at 7.5. Frank was always very keen to get the centre forward to score the goals at Brentford. You know, look, the likes of Vissa and Tony. So if they can get the right service to Solanke this season, sure he can put up some better numbers, definitely. And they're in the market for a few players as well. I think Savinho, Eze potentially. So yeah, I think Spurs are going to be a little bit of a wonder watch in the attack. Sunderland have got a few nice budget options. Could go for the goalkeeper, Roofs, 4.5. The defence, I think Reynildo is the best budget option there, 4 million. And yeah, you might be able to pick someone else out of there in a few weeks' time, but you know, he's got a bit of experience. Was at Atletico Madrid at one point, so yeah, it could be a decent shout for a bench player. Attackers and midfielders are quite a lot there, to be honest. I think Adingra at 5.5, if he gets the starts. You've seen it, he's a talented player. Diarra's supposed to be, quite a decent attacking midfielder. He's scored the other day in the friendlies, so one to watch. Lefay is only at 5 million. Again, he's sort of a more advanced midfielder. To see if he gets the starts, but that might be a nice price. And Xhaka is on the list there somewhere. I think he's in at 5. Should be on a lot of set pieces. There he is. Should Could be on set pieces. Might be on penalties if Mayenda doesn't get the next one after he missed one in pre-season. But yeah, another one maybe just to watch. Nice budget option. Guiu 4.5. Come from Chelsea on loan. Apparently they've got something in the contract saying that he needs to play a certain amount of games or they'll get fined. So I'm assuming they brought him in with the idea he's going to be the main striker, but they've also got a few other options. Mayenda looked pretty decent in the bits and pieces I've seen of him. So talented player. So I think there's a lot to wait and see with them, but might be a few budget players that pop up. West Ham, they've got Hermansen in now, 4.5. I think a Potter team generally is going to have a good defence, and he's had 6 months to work with them now, so adding a proper goalkeeper in there who's good for Leicester when they were in the Premier League a couple of years ago. Sort of playing a back five now, so Wan-Bissaka might be good for defensive contributions. I think the pick for their defence is probably Diouf. He's in my game week 1 team. Left wing back, he's very attacking. Seen some of the crosses he's putting in, real quality balls in. And, they've got Fulkrug there now to get on the end of a lot of the crosses. Bowen's there as well, so he could be a nice one with a few good fixtures at the start of the season. I think in midfield, it's going to be a wait and see on a few there. Maybe Paquetá can step up a bit more, probably on penalties, but not sure at 6 million for now. Somerville maybe later in the season if he gets back from injury, but yeah, I'm not really seeing a lot there. For me, it's the two forwards, Bowen and Fulkrug. I think Bowen at 8 million is quite pricey unless, West Ham can improve their attacking abilities this year, which, you'd expect so under Potter. But he's been playing up front in a 2 with Fulkrug in pre-season. He's only 6 million. So he was out injured basically since he arrived last season. So really interesting to see how he gets on. I think he's going to be in my game week 1 team. He's basically been asked to sit in the box and score the goals. So yeah, I think he could be a nice little pick for the first few games. And then last up is Wolves. Now, obviously, they've lost Semedo, they've lost Aït-Nouri, they've lost Cunha. Some of their best players have gone, and they haven't really replaced like for like. Defence does look a little bit light at the moment. I mean, Matt Doherty started most of pre-season at centre-back, so that sort of tells you where they're at. So I think they're definitely a team to target in terms of, playing against them. They have got a couple of nice options. I think Arias looked very good in the Club World Cup. He's a very good player for Fluminense, and he is actually, I think, 27, so he's not like a young player. He is an older player that's sort of ready to go. So hopefully he'll be able to take up some of the mantle from Cunha and take on some of the responsibility of the goals. Strand Larsen now has got no risk, of not starting. 6.5 million, should be on penalties. Could be a nice option, but again, I think it's a wait and see. I don't really want to pile into Wolves' attack until we sort of seen what they're going to look like. They were quite sort of solid last year when Pereira came in as manager, but yeah, I'm going to wait and see on them. So that's all the teams and just a little bit of an idea on my thoughts. And we will be looking to put out another video tomorrow, the team selection, and that'll be sort of, close to my final draft. So, and if anyone wants to see any content about my previous drafts, and I did a little piece on the new rules for FPL for the new season, just a few changes they've made to the point system, and go and check that out. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.